Welcome, everyone, to our study of the divine principle. We're going to go into our first presentation on the principle of creation, and this is going to be the first part of that study. When we look at the universe, humanity in the universe, behind humanity in the universe, we see a principle manifested, a principle at work. Because when we look at humanity in the universe, we see that it is born of a big bang, but it has come together in patterns that manifest beauty and order and purposefulness. And so behind that, we see a principle. The most advanced forms of quantum mechanics today are able to affirm and to assess a cosmic constant to the universe. And so behind this principle, we see a causal reality, and we refer to that causal reality as God, a God of intelligence, a God who designed through his principle humanity in the universe, a God that has emotional aspirations as well for creating. So God is the causal reality, and the resultant reality is humanity and the universe. So how can we know the nature of God, God who is invisible? If we were sitting here at Lake Tahoe, isn't that beautiful, and gazing at the sunset, probably whenever we've ever been in that environment, if we've ever had the opportunity to be in nature, we do feel a sense of the divine. We become more contemplative, more reflective, more aware of our internal spiritual side in that kind of environment. And it's not coincidental, because God is able to manifest himself. Though he's invisible, God is able to manifest himself through his created form. And this is something that St. Paul mentioned in his letter to the Romans, chapter 1, verse 20. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what he had made, so that men are without excuse. In other words, saying that God is invisible means that God is unknowable. And although we saw in a recent survey on Fox News that 92% of the people believe that God exists, if we talk about the nature of God, and more importantly, what is the nature of our response to God, then the numbers become a little bit more unclear, I'm sure. So, whereas most people believe in God, the real question is God knowable? And St. Paul gives us a window into the knowability of God. That through the things that he has made, we can know God. God expresses himself. A good analogy would be an artist, like this is Vincent van Gogh here. And we never met Vincent. He died long before our era. But his character, his invisible side, his nature, which we never knew, we never met him, is manifested in his visible works of art, the things that he has made. He's expressed his character into his visible artwork. And thus, though we've never met Vincent ourselves, we can certainly know a lot about his hopes, his dreams, and certainly his inner turmoil as an artist, because it's visibly manifested. This is what Paul is referring to in Romans 1:20. That the nature of God, which is invisible, is manifested visibly in his creation. And thus, God is knowable because he has manifested himself in a knowable and perceivable way. So then, if we look at the creation, we want to look at the common elements of creation, and we can know that God has manifested himself. So we look at the common elements in all the creation. We can look at it as if God has embossed his fingerprint on the things that he has made. And so we can then extrapolate deep meaning in being able to understand and ultimately relate with God by ascertaining the divine nature that is God. And one thing that we see right away when we look at the creation is that God has created all things in pairs. We could say a fundamental creation dynamic is that God has created all things by the pair system. As a matter of fact, Genesis 1:27 testifies to this pair dynamic, male and female, positive and negative, night and day, up and down, as the manifestation of God, is the very image of God. So that means that within the image of God himself, this pair dynamic is something very fundamental, something that is really the manifestation of God. And thus, when we examine the pair system, we can extrapolate tremendous insight into the nature of God and ultimately the nature of our relationship with him. In terms of the prevalence of the pair system, we see it on the atomic level. Here we have electrons engaged in a relationship with the nucleus of the atom. And if we go out into the outer reaches of the universe, it looks similar to the dynamic of the sun and the solar system. Again, cosmic constant guiding all things in the universe. So we see the pair system operating on the atomic level. We see the pair system operating on the plant level in the exchange between stamen and pistil, and as a vital marriage of sorts to maintain the various species of flora of the universe. We see on the animal level, of course, the dynamic of male and female relations. Recently, on the East Coast, we had the cicadas a couple years ago up here, and it was just constant noise of the cicadas. And of course, that's the mating call, males calling for females to promote and to maintain the species. And certainly on the human level, this dynamic of pairs, this power between of attraction between man and woman, we know is the power of love. So from the most highest element of creation to the most basic, we see the operation of pairs on every level. So when we look at the universe, when we look at any entity, we see this yin and yang dual characteristic as a fundamental relationship or fundamental structure. Of course, this is more the emphasis or the perspective of Oriental philosophy, the idea of yin and yang, the Tao, Taoism, the I Ching, and so forth. This is the observation of the universe, the balance of the universe, plus and minus, man and woman, male and female, the solar system, the planets spinning around the center of the sun. This is something we see with all entities of the universe. But we see another type of dual characteristic also with any entity in the universe. And this is a more essential dual characteristic. The dual characteristic of inner quality and outer form, as characterized by the mind and body relationship within the individual. So this is the duality, the dual characteristics of internal nature and external form. And of course, this would be more reflective of the Judeo-Christian perspective that sees God as having an internal nature, having personality, having intelligence, having consciousness, having a heartistic nature that we have to respond to and come into relationship with. So we see throughout the universe this manifestation of these two types of dual characteristics, and thus as the fingerprint of God embossed upon all things, we can extrapolate back towards God and understand that the designer is a God, the image, that is possessing those very dual characteristics. In other words, original yin and original yang, or original masculinity and original femininity, original positivity, original negativity, originates in God. That system, that dynamic throughout the universe, originates in God and is, a matter of fact, the foundation of God's very own existence. And also, likewise, we can conclude about God in that we see the dual characteristics of internal nature and external form within every entity. We can then know that the first cause, the designer himself, is a God of internal nature and a God of external form. So we can look to God as possessing the qualities of personality. And ultimately, we're moving towards the idea that our relationship with God, our response to God, is going to involve likewise our own consciousness, our own will, our own emotions in a relationship with God as a personal being. So thus, when we look at God, not that we want to reduce God down to a chart, but for the purpose of explanation, we can see that this view harmonizes with the biblical view. The overwhelming testimony of Scripture is that God is essentially two things. God is spirit, and we would say that that would be like the outer manifestation of God. God is a spiritual being. The universe was created ex nihilo, not out of material, but out of nothing with quotation marks, which means out of the Spirit of God. So God's outer form is His Spirit, testified to in John 4:24. But more importantly, more essentially, is God's internal nature. And we see that testified overwhelmingly in the Scripture, and here cited in 1 John 4:16, that God is love, that God is a being of love, and that ultimately we're going to see that the motive, the core, chief motive of creation is the motive of love, to live in love, to form a partnership of love with a love object, that ultimately is God's motive in creation. And what this indicates here is that, so out of God's original internal nature, His nature manifests in a masculine way and in a feminine way. Likewise, His spiritual form manifests in creation in masculine forms and feminine forms. And so God is not a God of division, however. These dual characteristics in God are harmonized, and why Mark 12:29 refers to the Lord as one. God is one. God is harmonized. You know, in a biblical sense, philosophically, one doesn't just mean single, but it means components that are in harmony. As Jesus said that God and Christ are one, and that all believers should be one. It doesn't mean single. It's suggesting that a relationship of harmony should be achieved. So God is a God of the dual characteristics of internal nature and external form, of yin, of yang, but they are harmonized and in a state of oneness with God. So God is one, and therefore, because God is one, then God is the archetype of creation. God is the archetypical existence. And when God created the universe, He created by the same system, the same dynamic by which He Himself exists. In other words, this principle by which God created, this cosmic constant, of the universe is not something that God just had to think up. God merely, in a sense, examined his own principle by which he exists, and I guess he decided, hey, this works pretty good. I'm existing, been around a long time, gonna be around a long time. So God applied his own principle of existence to the work of creation. The result is that the creation reflects God because, and the reason it reflects God is because the creation exists by the same principle by which God exists. And that's why we see, in the case of male and female, that we stand as the image of God, a high degree of reflection of God, as testified in Genesis 1:27. Male and female, and then the dynamic of bringing male and female together in a committed relationship of love becomes something that ultimately is rooted in the very life and existence of God. And that's why marriage and family is such an essential social relationship, social unit, and a building block for a stable society, because that system is anchored in the very existence of God and in the very design of the universe. Matthew 19:4-6, Jesus said, "Haven't you read," Jesus replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one." There's that term, one. That doesn't mean they become one person, but they become a unit, one flesh, so that they're no longer two, but one. We call that marriage, a committed marriage, a God-centered marriage. And that's why that idea is so essential for the expansion of a stable society. We're going to take a break here and stop this presentation. Thank you very much for your attention, and God bless you.